of the Grit and Script podcast on the Flickaholics channel. I'm your guest host, Nicholas Clement, and tonight I'm joined by co-host and screenwriter Bill Narducci and very special guests Johnny Brennan and James Melkonian. Johnny is, of course, famous and celebrated around the world as the creator of the Jerky Boys. And tonight we'll be chatting with him about the time Hollywood came calling and turned his prank phone calls into a feature film. In the years since the Jerky Boys exploded onto the scene, Johnny has transitioned into the role as a voice actor, working on the acclaimed comedy series Family Guy for over 20 years, creating the character of Mort Goldman. And for all the Jerky Boys fans out there, you can hit Johnny up on Cameo, as he does personalized messages tailor-made to the recipient using many of those famous voices from Saul Rosenberg and Frank Rizzo that we all know and love. James is the director and co-writer of The Jerky Boys, the movie, which was released in 1995 and cleverly blended the heightened personalities of its stars, Johnny Brennan and Kamal Ahmed, with a meta-narrative that was honestly a little ahead of its time in many respects. Can't wait to get into all the creative aspects to how this movie came together. James also directed the cult classic The Stoned Age and has worked as a film editor and post-production executive at New World Pictures in the 80s, working on films including Heathers and Hellraiser. He's also an advertising writer, producer, and director. He's cut award-winning trailers and commercials, and he's an all-around cool dude, which is the most important thing. So, guys, welcome to the show. Can't wait to dive into all the Jerky Boys madness, and seriously, it's a real treat and honor to get this opportunity to talk to you about this movie and your careers and how this all sort of came to be. So thank you.
You know, I have to say right off the bat, this is great because after all these years that have gone by, this is the first time I'm actually seeing and talking to Jim. It's got to be 30 years, 1995, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's a real cool thing. So I appreciate that.
No, definitely me too. Great to see you again, Johnny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, it's fun. Just going back and revisiting the movie just recently, I was struck by, honestly, the first thing that struck me, and we can get into anything. We can really just we can take the conversation anywhere. It really did hit me sort of how ahead of its time it was, just in terms of blending the personas of people who had just really taken the entertainment world by storm with a very specific thing. And it's like, you guys are playing yourselves, but not really. And then you were working all these things in from the calls, but it was taken out of context and put into new context. So I guess I guess the big question is, and Johnny, we can start with you. How did Hollywood come calling for a movie? I mean, a lot of people who listen to this are going to obviously know the backstory of the Jerky Boys and they're going to be fans. But since we're talking about the movie, how did you first get contacted by Hollywood? How did this all, come about?
Well, it was very, very interesting. You can only imagine if you put yourself in my shoes. At the time, I was literally hanging off buildings for a living in New York City. I was a construction guy. I was, scaffold worker and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And, but I, for all my life, even as a kid, I was always, doing voices and making tapes and all that crap. And I was always, recording stuff from my brothers. So we would come up to the country here and we'd all get together on the weekend and we'd all play these tapes and whatnot of the stuff that I recorded, the voices and the characters, and just fucking with people. No matter how you slice it, it comes down to just really get, screwing around with people. So, and that always made me piss myself. So, and then, so that shit we got going with that. And that was going on for a long time. And what happened was, as years went by, the tapes started getting around, and, a lot of stuff I did in the 70s. And then there was stuff that I did in the early 80s. And, then it started to come, like, where Kamal comes into the picture. Well, like, the funny thing is, when Kamal came into the picture, there was no such thing as the Jerky Boys. It was just me doing crazy shit for my brothers and getting together on the weekends. And Kamal is the one that actually came over to my apartment one night and was listening to these things that I recorded, and he was on the floor dying. And I thought he was being a sarcastic, just being a wise ass. So I'm like, dude, and it's because I was already embarrassed listening to my own voice in front of other people. I didn't like it. I never liked that. A lot of people don't like that. I've since grown to understand that that's it. So anyway, so he's on the floor and he's rolling around and he gets up and he's got tears in his eyes. And I was like, he says to me, he goes, that is the funniest shit. That is. So anyway, Kamal thought it was incredible. So he just asked if he could borrow the tapes, whatever the hell it was at the time, the bootleg. And Kamal went out and started, Kamal was a great bass player, great musician. He went out and he used to gig all over New York and play in downtown Manhattan and out in Queens and all this. So he made copies, and with lots of musician friends that he had, they made copies. And that from there on, it just went berserk. And I remember it was like 1985. I was at a family reunion up in Wurtsboro, New York. And I have a huge family, lots and lots of Brennans. So I got cousins coming from all over the place at the reunion saying, hey, Johnny, there's a tape going around at my college. And Johnny, we heard at my college. All I kept hearing was college. And I was like, wow, holy shit. And because they knew right away it was me because of the names I was using, like Brett Weir, for example, and all the little nuances that were only coming from the stuff that they knew and they grew up with as well. Because, my dad, who's Frank Rizzo, their fathers are his brother. So everything is intertwined. So then I'm like, wow, this is freaking amazing. How does it get all over the place in colleges? And so then next thing you know, it's being played on the Howard Stern show. And not just Howard Stern, it was up north in Boston and all these other areas. And it was Mark Parento, who was the Howard Stern of that area. So that's how I heard that it was all over the place. And that's when the record companies came looking, and they were like, this is gold, man. And I remember, people, there were quotes from Eddie Murphy saying that it was, he said before this Frank Rizzo guy came along, you had some guy standing on a stage telling jokes in front of a red brick wall. This Frank Rizzo comes along and it's like a breath of fresh air. So it kind of took the world by storm, this whole thing that, was created just for my brothers, just kidding around. So then now it's growing and growing. And now, so we got a record deal down in Florida with a little shit hole record company that was only using the Jerky Boys, which again, we didn't have the name yet. It was just, me, but the whole story, Kamal getting involved, he would come over every night to the apartment right after he started handing out the tapes. I'm going back a little bit here. So he'd start hanging out the tapes because the musicians are playing, everybody's getting the tapes, everybody's listening to this shit, and they're like, oh my God, this fucking stuff is amazing. So it was almost like somebody found like a new booze or something. So anyway, and then so Kamal, we get this, and so Kamal keeps saying to me every night, I got to get up in the work in the morning for work, construction. You got to get up at 6 o'clock. Kamal's every night coming over to the apartment. He's got a bottle of booze, and he's got some food from his father's Indian restaurant. He's like, come on, we stay up tonight. We're going to do some calls. And I'm like, Kamal, you fucking bastard. I got to get the fuck up for work. So and that's how it started where, we're just doing calls in the bedroom, and then, I'm like half falling asleep, like cursing him out, get the fuck out of here, go home. And so we do a few calls, this, that, the other thing. And then the record company down in Florida, little record company, then what they did was they underhandedly sold us off to a bigger record company that was a subsidiary of Atlantic Records, the Great Atlantic, Led Zeppelin and all this other stuff. So, and that's how it all got started. So before you know it, it was like I was 1 minute hanging off of buildings, and the next minute I'm signing record deals where I got my ass handed to me, by the way. Everybody knows that. But everybody will tell you the same story. Anyone from Bon Jovi to fucking Madonna. So anyway, that happened. And not only was it so amazing that it started to sell records immediately, but it started to shatter records. I was out selling Aerosmith in Boston like 10-1, their hometown. And so the Jerky Boys now became this gigantic success story. So probably Jim knows this better than anybody. What happens now is Hollywood sniffs that out because it's making this tremendous sensation. Nothing like it was ever seen or heard yet. And so the guy that's responsible, I say it to this day, was Tony Danza. Tony Danza was the guy that stepped up to the plate, and Tony put up the money. He said he flew me and Kamal and the schmuck that is the head of the little baby record label that I won't mention. I won't even mention. So he flew us out to California because Tony Danza said, "I'm telling you, this is fucking gold." So we met Tony Danza, by the way, one of the sweetest, one of the most down to earth, real guys you could ever meet, one of the nicest people I ever met. And so Tony takes us over to meetings with, I believe it was Sony. So we go over there, and I remember Tony being very agitated and very angry because the people in the boardroom, they weren't getting it. And I remember Tony blowing up and saying, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" He was slamming the table. I mean, he was literally slamming the table. He's like, this is selling millions of records. This is a tremendous story. This story has to be told. And they didn't get it. And I'll never forget, Tony Danza was so upset. They just didn't get it. But by the end of the day, and again, this gets back to Jim, this is the Hollywood, this is the way it works out there. By the end of the day, every major studio, they knew the Jerky Boys were in town. And, by the end of the day, I had meetings with Disney, with Warner Brothers. I mean, you name the company, and it was on with all of these different companies. And it was Emilio Estevez that was the guy. Emilio was the guy. We met with Emilio, and I took a liking to Emilio, and there was nothing else we could do, but that was it. That's how it all started, and that's how the whole thing came about. That's just it in a nutshell. It's a lot deeper than that, a lot more different avenues, but that's it kind of in a nutshell. Sorry about the long answer.
In retrospect, it's crazy that Disney were the ones that financed an R-rated Jerky Boys movie.
From what I heard, right, Jim? From what I heard, it could be wrong, that it was their first rated R picture. I could be wrong though.
They have few labels under, like Touchstone. I think had done R-rated movies before that, but
right. This was a Touchstone Pictures, Caravan Pictures, distributed by Buena Vista Pictures.
Yeah.
So truly old school.
Yep.
Bill, you want to jump in?
Yes. So James, how did you get connected to the movie?
So the way it started for me is like for a year before, I think it was when you put out the first album, Johnny. I didn't know the original tapes, at least that well. I maybe had heard them around, but when you guys put out the first album, I had started hearing this stuff, and I just thought it was hilarious. Me and my friends thought this stuff was brilliant. I had no idea that Hollywood was calling you guys and all that. But then I had been, for the last few years leading up to that, I'm making this movie called The Stoned Age, which I finished.
Yes.
Which Rich Wilkes, who also worked on Jerky Boys with us, had also written with me. And so we had just finished that movie at the end of '93. And it had gone around, and different younger people, especially in Hollywood, and people really liked it. They thought it was a pretty damn funny comedy, and it had sort of an edge to it and for some reason, you remember John Glickman, right?
Of course. Who sent me The Stoned Age? Joe Roth.
Joe Roth, yes.
Yeah, Joe Roth. He sent it to my house. He's like, "Johnny, check this," and I loved it. I thought it was great.
So because so I was going around after finishing that movie and taking meetings, and looking for a new project, and it was Jonathan I met before Joe, and remember Roger as well. But I first met
Roger. Yep.
I think it was his idea. I think he had bent, Joe's ear about, hey, these guys, the Jerky Boys, are brilliant, and we should figure out a way to make a movie about them, or not so much about them, but a movie with them.
Right.
So they brought me in to pitch, just based on that they'd seen this other movie I liked, and we started pitching basic ideas, and I was thinking, should you make it like an animated movie with the different voices and all that? And Jonathan, I think it worked out like Jonathan said. Because in my mind, I'm like, how do you make a movie that's not, this was before sort of the reality TV days where you could do something that's just reality, that's just real prank phone calls. What I thought was funniest was the characters you guys had created, more
Right.
so than to me than the shock and surprise of calling some unsuspecting person on the phone. So I
Right.
thought, how can we get these characters into something? And it was Jonathan who had the idea, of meshing it with a mob movie. The idea that, hey, these guys are prank phone callers, and they dial up the mob, which is a pretty funny, as you sort of said, Nick. It's sort of a meta thing, because it's sort of taking the Jerky Boys as what they were really doing in real life, and then tying it to all these tropes of Scorsese and the Godfather type of movies. And it was the mesh of that. That was Jonathan Glickman's basic idea. So then I went back and they said, you come back in and pitch something along these lines. So I worked on it for a little while, and that's where we added stuff like starting out with you guys as these sort of fictional versions of you as kids, where you're doing pranks as kids.
Right.
And I think I met you around this time. Maybe this was after the pitch was in, but I remember coming out to New York and meeting with you and Kamal.
Yep.
But and then we started fleshing out the idea, and then adding the character of the mother, and just sort of sketched out the rough idea. And I thought, hey, it's a tough nut to crack, how to make a really solid movie out of this. And I kind of went into the second pitch meeting thinking, hey, they'll give me the job. I'll have a year, and Johnny and Kamal and I can write it together and spend all this time. And they go, that's great. We love this thing. We want to start shooting. And this was in late 1993. And
that's
saying,
right.
We want to be shooting by February. You mean February 2 years from now? Wait, February a year from now? And no, 2 months from now. And I'm all like, but how can you turn that down? I mean, it's because this project with Johnny, with Kamal, and just with these characters seemed so much more just interesting and edgy than just taking on, something else that Disney was doing that they might want to hire me on as a director or whatever. So I bit, I remember I flew out there a few weeks later. And at that time, I was also, without a year to work on, I think Rich, who was a great writing partner who I worked on The Stoned Age with, I probably would have asked him to work with me on it right away, but I think he was busy on Billy Madison. He did some work on, I think it was Billy Madison for Adam Sandler movie.
Or was it?
So he was busy right away. But once I got to New York and started setting up, and before I even had the script written, remember, Johnny, we would start meeting and going around to look for locations, and we had that rehearsal studio, and we don't have the script ready, but we're already starting to move forward and put this movie together. We know that we're going to need a scene in a club, so they're looking for a club. We know we need the house where the Jerky Boys grow up, so we found that out in Queens. But we didn't have a script yet, so we're casting. We're also casting it and doing all that. So luckily, I got Rich free. He finished his work on that, and he came out for a couple of weeks in New York, where we just cranked out and got a first draft that we could actually do a schedule on and actually get it rolling as a movie. So, and that was the thing originally. Usually if even though we're adapting Johnny and Kamal's creative work, their characters. Usually that still is, as we'd be the writers and they would be separate as just the talent or whatever, and we were just adapting their work. But we ended up bringing them on as co-writers just because they were so much, we were all sort of just working on the ideas together. That we remember that, the boiled potatoes or all the stuff we'd keep adding. So it was just such a lightning in the bottle thing to do, and I think we didn't actually start shooting in February. I think it was more like a month or two later we finally cameras started rolling. But we were really fortunate that we had Jonathan Glickman and Joe Roth they were really behind the project, and they gave us a lot of freedom, and we were able, because the one thing I got in the same situation with The Stoned Age. Originally, The Stoned Age, Disney wanted to make, but they didn't want something that had that much bad language in it, so it was the same thing with this, but I'm really glad they sort of gave us the freedom, because you can't take that out of, there's nothing mean-spirited about the bad language. It's just part of the vibe of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So it was just a lot of fun to be able to do it at sort of the way it should be done. And I really love the sort of the riff off the mob movie stuff, the New York mob movie stuff, and then sort of tying it into the real lore of the Jerky Boys. It's just when you guys at the beginning of the movie, when we peel off those masks you guys are wearing, you had actually worn those happy face masks at some interview, because you guys were playing this whole idea, the mystery of who the Jerky Boys are.
Yeah,
right,
it was
Johnny?
during that Connie Chung interview.
Yeah, and so we
Yeah,
just decided
yeah.
within the movie to reveal you guys when Warzik, you guys get arrested in the beginning of the movie, and that was like the first time people were going to see you. So it was kind of trying to weave those two things together. The real story of the Jerky Boys, along with
Right.
this, and then we were really lucky with Jonathan and Joe and Roger getting us, like, we got Ozzy Osbourne in the movie, we got
Yep.
Alan Arkin.
Yeah, I want to ask. I want to ask about Alan Arkin. So if the Jerky Boys are going to prank the mob and run afoul of someone, so getting Alan Arkin to be in this movie, do you guys know where that idea came from? Whose suggestion that was?
I'm pretty sure it was Joe Roth. It might have been Jonathan Glickman. But
you know who else was instrumental in that, Jim? Do you remember my manager, Harry?
Harry, sure, yeah.
Harry was very good friends with Alan Arkin's son, and I don't remember
with Adam.
Yes, Adam. Yeah. That's correct. And they would have lots of talks, and Harry, I think he had a lot to do with maybe coercing, and just maybe fudging that a little bit, helping that out.
Oh, that's probably right, because I know when I first met with him, he was really, he had been around for a long time doing it, and he was like working with young guys like me and you guys. He was a little bit like, should I do this or not? And then once we all got together, he was having a lot of fun with it. So,
right.
So he really got it. But I thought the original idea came from Joe, or maybe that's just how I heard it. And because we were just trying to cast other actors, and just meeting with, and there's some funny New York actors that could have played the part, but nobody at the level of Alan Arkin to do it, that just based on his resume and all that. But so that's how that got started.
So we have a question from the chat from Brick Records. Because were there any parts cut from the movie that you wish made it in?
Johnny or me?
Any. It's a toss up. Whatever you
All got. Right, yeah, Jim could answer. Jim could answer too. But I have, all I keep hearing about is how hilarious the made for television version is, and I could never get my hands on a copy of the made for TV version. Jim, do you remember when you had me running down the street with Bill Hickey in the wheelchair?
Yeah. Well, there are three. Yeah.
I would give anything to have that.
I wonder where that is, because that is just, Disney put that together to sell it because they needed to sell a version without profanity in it.
Right.
To the TV networks. I mean, that was before. Now you can put anything on cable and all that. I guess you could, but so they want just to fill out, so there was enough time. They put in every scene that we just decided to cut in editing the movie, and there was that chase at the end. It was just we just had a scene at the end of the movie where everybody you guys had fucked over during the movie end up chasing you down that street by Mickey's bar.
Yeah.
It was right outside of Mickey's bar, right?
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Then we also had the scene with the basketball player. Why can't I think of it? Ewing.
Patrick Ewing. Yep.
Where we went out and we shot a whole sequence with Kamal doing a prank call on Patrick Ewing.
What?
And this isn't that in the, from what I've heard, that's in the, I mean, it was definitely something we shot and didn't end up in the movie. I don't know why it didn't test well, or people didn't like us we weren't really making fun of Patrick Ewing, but it was the idea that Kamal, as like the Egyptian magician, calls Patrick Ewing and tells him his astrological chart tells him that he's going to start shooting bricks, only bricks from now on. So then he no longer can make a basket. And I don't know why it just didn't ever click with people as a funny scene. So that got taken out, but put into just length. And I guess and there was one other sequence. There's just that thing we shot at the beginning. Or maybe I'm trying to think of where you guys throwing that doll off of the top of a building. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, that's what happened when I was a kid.
Story.
Yeah, that comes from my childhood. The thing am I also remembering too? I think I brought this up with Nick. I could have sworn it was not just Patrick Ewing, but it was all like heavy duty New Yorkers, and I could have sworn that they had something like they wanted to do with Trump at the time. Am I wrong?
Not that I ever saw Trump, and I can imagine somebody, because he was like one of those guys that would show up in a movie back then.
Right.
But I don't remember that ever coming, being brought up to me,
Okay, all right, yeah.
Do that.
Because I remember it was supposed to be something like where I was supposed to call him or something like that, or but and my memory is usually very, very good. But no, that was just one thing I was thinking. I ran it by Nick. I thought maybe that was
might
part
have been
of
something we talked about. Well, we never shot it, but also there was the thing with calling Bill Clinton, which we just manufactured
Yes,
at the end of the movie. But
yes,
you know, we didn't
yeah,
really get him. We just found
yeah,
that shot where he's inside the White House picking up the phone,
yeah.
and
That,
we
yep,
just cheated that as something that happened.
yes,
But
that worked out perfectly.
And that was in the trailer. That was the
yeah, that was sort of
the big joke in the trailer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
go on.
we have another question from the chat from VC Flair. What was it like working with Alan North from Police Squad? And
Oh, he was awesome. Such a sweet guy. You know,
really?
he was pretty old then. Yeah, he's the and we, you know, it's because the whole idea that he was going to beat you guys up in the bar, I just thought was the funniest thing. And he was a little too old to pull it off the way, you know, if you had a week to shoot that sequence and choreograph it also, it really, I mean, it always comes across to me a little bit like, how's he going to, but I still thought he was just one of the sweetest guys. And, you know, the casting director, to say like he had to take the subway out every day to, you know, to come to the auditions and to come to the set. And I think that was one of his last roles that he did. I mean, he
I
was
think
such
so.
yeah.
He was a great guy, though. You're right. And I told him in that bar scene, I said, "Listen, Alan," I said, don't feel for a minute. You got to hold back, man."
Yeah, I
I said,
remember
you know, I was like, just go, let it fly, man. We want this to look good. And he was like, I'll try, I'll give it the best I got, you bastard. And you know who is my favorite? To this day, I think I love this guy. Remember Brad Sullivan?
Oh
Yeah,
yes,
Johnny, I was
wonderful.
just about to say, I had forgotten that Brad Sullivan was in there, and I grew up watching Slapshot, and
Yeah.
Slapshot, yes.
I forgot that he was in the film, and he's
Yeah.
so funny. He was one of those guys that, first off, the cast in general is very deep. There's a lot of great face actors. And there's a lot of actors in this movie that were always good, no matter what movie you put them in or how big their role was. And Brad Sullivan was one of those actors, you know, just he could never be bad.
No,
He was so great to work with.
he was.
Brad.
I'll never forget, Jim, when Brad Sullivan came down to the audition. We were in this room, like I don't remember where it was, but we were in this room, and it was a small table, and it was
Oh yeah.
Jim was there, I was there, and I remember Brad Sullivan reading, and I'll never forget, as long as I live. Brad Sullivan said, "Okay, fellas, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you." And I had in my head, I gotta leave this. I said, "Jim, I gotta take a leak. I'll be right back." And I just wanted to say to him, I just wanted to shake his hand and say, "Hey," I said, "Mr. Sullivan," I said, "Look, this is an honor for me that you're here, you know, to be."
You knew
He
him
goes,
from Slapshot.
"Yeah, because I loved him. I loved him from Slapshot." And you got to understand, here I am, this construction guy, and I got, you know, Alan Arkin and Brad Sullivan, and they're sitting at this table auditioning for a movie that I'm starring in, this movie called The Jerky Boys. And you know, what a feeling that is, man. And if you could express that to people, that's a really wonderful thing, man. You know, it's like you talk about the American dream. There it is, right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it came from your talent, you know, what you and Kamal did from nothing, just those characters. And, you know, I'm so happy now 30 years later that they're in the movie and it's, you know, still something everybody can see. But Brad Sullivan was just like, to find the right tone of the sort of humor we were doing in this movie, because it was kind of, we were going for sort of an old school comedy feel, like it, you know.
Yep.
And I remember even the our gaffer was just so surprised how we were shooting it in like wider shots and trying to make it like an old 40s movie feel to it. I don't know. I mean, that was something we had in our heads. But guys like Brad Sullivan, they just seem to be in that world, you know, that sort of pulpy, sort of goofy world that I thought he pulled off so well as the, you know, as the cop there, you know.
He was
just obsessed with you guys.
You know, he was a character on every day on the movie set, guys. I'll never forget. He would come up and you'd hear him a mile away. He would go, he would be like, "Johnny, there he is, Johnny." And he was always looking for my brother Anthony. He goes, "God, where's Anthony? Where's Anthony?" And he would go like this. He would go, "Ribs today, Anthony, ribs." He would always tell, he would always tell my brother what we were having for dinner. and one time I remember he was getting wired up. We were doing in the police station. We were doing a police scene, and I'm sitting in a chair just killing some time. And right behind me is Brad Sullivan, and the girls are telling him to stand up because they got to tape him up and do some wiring job on him.
Yeah.
So he goes like this. He puts his hands behind his head like this, and he stands up, and his shit falls out all over the place. And he's got his hands up here like this, and he goes, "Come on, wire me up. You never seen anything like that before." And he was
saying his junk, right?
yeah, his fucking his schwanz is hanging out, and he's got his arms up here. He's like, "Come on, let's just wire me up." He was one of the funniest fucking guys, and you know, but all of the guys. It was such a treasure, really, to work with all like Tarantina, and you had James
Bryan, yeah,
and James Lawrence. I mean,
yes.
They were all great. Vinny, everybody. It was such a great cohesive unit, man, that everybody got along so
No,
great,
it was great.
man.
And we, Vinny, that was great because I know we all saw him just because he wasn't known at all then. That was before
No, he
Sopranos.
wasn't. Yep.
And he came in, and he just is another guy that brought that sort of old school. He's a mobster, but he doesn't seem too mean, really. Like he seems like kind of. And he, I know he's always credited the movie for sort of giving. I know he had done some small roles before that, but
yeah.
But I know he credited the movie as sort of being, that we trusted enough in him to have that big of a part, and I think he's such a key part of the whole thing. But
and you're right, he does. And to this day, if when I actually auditioned for a Mercedes-Benz commercial with him. Geez, it has to be 15 years ago at least. And I remember him saying to me, he goes, "Johnny, I walk down the street," and he says, "I'm telling you right now," he says, "Tony Scarboni." He goes, "People now, so they know him as Big Pussy and Tony Scarboni."
And Tony Scarboni.
Yep, but think about it. Here's a quick funny story. Frank Cervero from The Godfather, right?
Mm-hmm.
I made friends with Frank Cervero because we shot a bit. Mariah Carey asked me to be in her video, her Honey video. So she wanted me to be one of the mafia guys in her. So anyway, Frank and I become friends. And to this day, it's so funny. Frank goes, he's like, "Johnny, I don't understand. You guys, I should have been in that picture. I should have been in." And he's talking about the Jerky Boys. He goes, "I don't understand. I would be perfect for that picture." I can't do a great Frank Cervero, but his voice is so classic. But it's funny that even he
perfect, dude.
Yeah, but how many guys, Jim, came down to be in that picture? And the beautiful thing, I think I said this to you, Nick, is these people that came, they wanted to be part of that Jerky Boys picture. It's such a unique thing, man.
Yeah. And Johnny, I wanted to ask, how hard was it for you guys to weave in all of the catchphrases and the one-liners that fans had gotten so excited over and gotten so obsessed with? How hard was that to inject those into a narrative completely separate from the calls? Like what was that creative process like for you guys?
Well, I think for Jim, I mean, that's a better way because Jim, as the director, he had to figure out a way. Because for me, see, everything I do is I create these little mini movies in my head, and this is way before the motion pictures. This is even before the records when I was a little kid doing these voices on tape. I had a little movie in my head spinning that I was seeing, and I was trying to translate that onto the tape so that the person listening could kind of see what I was seeing in my head. So then it becomes a job for like Jim as a director to do the same thing onto the screen. So like things like, I think it would have to be turned more into the picture, like, the famous Brett Weir skit. So instead of it just being like the catchphrase is like, "Get Brett Weir," I said. Now you got the whole thing in there with James Lorenz as Brett Weir. And Jim, you could probably answer that one, way better than me.
Well, yeah, for the catch, I mean, that's what we tried to do. Is Brett Weir was already a famous character because of the call you originally did with him,
right?
But so we worked him because he was the perfect sort of weasel character. The way you set up in that first call, that he'd be great to be the sort of conduit you guys have to the mob, the guy you used to know. You actually pranked him as a little kid,
right?
So that's not direct from what the original call was, but it got some of those catchphrases in there. But so we had the first album when we were writing it. We had the first album, and then we had I think we had more than all the calls that ended up on the second album.
Yes.
And so we had all those to play off of, and Rich and I, as we wrote scene, okay, we want a scene where they call up the mob that are sitting around that table, and we tried to just figure out a way to work in some of the famous catchphrases and then let you guys sort of riff on it when you actually did the scene. But we wanted to always give you a structure so you had that to fall back on. The way to get sizzle chest in there, way to get,
Right.
But I remember I remember casting with the line that you had, I forget which call it's from, when you say, I will split your nuts from your head to the back of your ass.
Yes.
That just always cracked me up. It's just such a bizarro thing to say.
That's from the fava.
Right.
That's from the fava bean call. I'm going to
Right.
split your nuts to the back of your ass.
Saying that in front of Alan Arkin as a mob boss just struck me as one of just the funniest contrasts. But then there's stuff like one of the lines because you come up with stuff that's just out of nowhere, and there's a couple of them that were not in the script at all. That I think in ADRs when you came up with that Milky Liquor line, I don't think we even read that on the set. I think that was late.
Yeah,
right?
the Milky Liquor line.
That was never in a call, was it?
No, that was never. I don't believe I might have used it in a call. I don't remember, but I do remember the exact moment where I made that up. And I remember I was in my house not far from here over in Washingtonville, New York. And I remember just laying in bed sometimes when I can't sleep, weird words and phrases. And that's why what's beautiful about that Alan Arkin thing is when that stuff flies out of my mouth, it's like when I'm doing the calls, it's like it just comes flying out. And a lot of the times it doesn't make any sense at all. And I always tell people that's the magic of the Jerky Boys. And I always say, you know what? It's a well. It's kind of like a well that I always go back to. And I always tell people, thank God that it hasn't run dry. And it's like I can still go back there and some funky, wacky shit. Like my newest album I just finished in 2021. And it's been 25 years since I put out an album. And still, and still shit will come out like that. And I'll be like, wow, where did that come from after it's over? But that's the beauty of the whole Jerky Boys thing. And it's a wonderful thing, Jim, when you could look now and after all these years, people just don't like it, or they just don't say, oh my God, I love that, then. People to this day, it's like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's got a massive cult following. People really love the Jerky Boys. And there's so much more to it. It's like what you were saying before with some of these big guys that were in there. You had some big guns in there. Suzanne Shepard, Alan Arkin. I mean, Brad Sullivan. These are all William Hickey. These are all big time guys. And it's like,
do you realize that the 30th anniversary of the release of this movie is February 3rd? Is next Monday?
Of course it is. Why I hadn't been thinking about that, but that's definitely it. Yeah,
30. Yeah,
February 3rd, 1995.
February 3rd, 1995.
And it's like stuck in time. It's timeless.
But
I still remember I saw it in the. I remember going to the theater to see it opening weekend with my buddies, and I made my dad take us all, and it was great. I had made my parents listen to the tapes when it was 92 when I discovered the cassettes, and I was 12 and changed my life completely. I can still remember making my parents listen to it, and they thought it was absolutely priceless as well. And when the movie came around, it was like, oh my God, Dad, like we got to go see the Jerky Boys movie. And I remember we were just all laughing, and it's a special time, in history at this point now, pre 9/11 New York. I love to say it was a very, very special time and place. And I less about the movie and more so about some of what you guys did originally. I just cannot believe that there were so many people who were willing to be put on like that on the phone. And these days you just wouldn't be able to, you just can't get away with it with the same level of innocence to it. And that was one of the things that translated over to the movie, is that you guys did bring that spirit of just having fun with it. I think that some people, they misconstrued the Jerky Boys back in the day as being,
mean spirited or something.
I gotta tell you what, you just hit the nail on the head. I think that's one of the other reasons why people over 40 plus years, 55 decades, love the Jerky Boys, is because there was never anything mean spirited about it. And even people to this day, they'll say, you know, when you listen to Frank Rizzo, in one sentence, he'll say he's going to wrap your fucking head in with a ratchet. And then in the next sentence, he's saying, look, I'm the best, man. You got it. And so it's a very, people would say to me, yeah, Johnny, but there's something funny. He's a very lovable guy. And so that's the funny part about when you see the characters, like Jim was saying before, it's these characters. And the reason I tell people to this day, after all these years, the reason that they work so well is because they're real. They're real people. When I made all these characters up, I was just doing exaggerated versions of my mom, my father, my Uncle Vinny. I could go down the list. Farmer Brown, who, you know, not far from where I'm at right now. He's long since passed away. When I do Big Old Badass Bob, the cattle rustler, all these characters are based on real people that I turned into cartoons of themselves, if that makes any sense.
So I had a question. Who decided on Tom Jones doing a cover of "Are You Gonna Go My Way"? And what was Paul Bartel like? That was such a treat in the movie.
Oh yeah, well, I know with you know, it's a music supervisor, Anita Camerata, and probably from either Joe Roth or Glickman or Birnbaum's. You know, I remember it now. John Glickman, we were talking, we need to get a musical act. I mean, we also got Ozzy and Helmet, but they, you know, they want to pepper this movie with you know, moments like that. But then I think we originally wanted a different singer, but from that same era as Tom Jones. Not Sinatra. Who's the Tony
Bennett?
Tony Bennett, I think, is what we discussed originally. Yeah. But then, and I don't know if he wouldn't do it, or we then came up with the idea. But I think that came from like John Glickman and the music supervisor, who was Anita Camerata, and the song. What they worked that out. That's nothing that I had much to do with. Although it's definitely, it's such a great scene with
yes, it is.
With Tom, and Tom Jones also really liked the Jerky Boys stuff. Yeah,
yes.
I mean, if you talk to him about it, he. So I think that was another thing that helped get him to want to do this.
Hey, Jim, do you remember on the movie set that day, Tom Jones was running 102 fever. He was sick, and he was in his honey wagon, and all he wanted to do was meet Kissel. So I had to go. I had to go down to the village, and I had to get my Uncle Vinny in a cab. And they brought my Uncle Vinny. He put a jacket on, a suit jacket, just to come up and meet Tom Jones.
Yeah, I remember.
And Tom Jones took pictures with my uncle, and he said, "I'm so glad to meet you." And it was such a nice day for my uncle, who not long after that he passed away. He was a World War II veteran, but he got to say that he met Tom Jones, and it was like a huge highlight. But that's a true story. And Tom Jones, like Jim is saying, he truly loved the whole Jerky Boys thing.
What you guys have done. That's what lured him into the thing.
Yeah.
And the same with Ozzy Osbourne, because remember the whole day with Ozzy, he because he came in, and I remember the first thing, and you know, Ozzy Osbourne is like the devil. Like he bites out the head off of, you know, now he's a much more, his whole persona is much softer, but that was when he was still Ozzy, Black Sabbath and all that. And the first thing you wanted to do was hug you guys. And I'm like nervous because you don't audition Ozzy Osbourne. He just shows up on the day and he's going to do it, you know.
Right,
and
right.
First thing you wanted, and I'm like, he wants to hug the Jerky Boys. This is a different vibe. And then remember, we were supposed to shoot with him for 2 days in that club. And then his back home, one of his kids shot the other kid with a BB gun.
His son
had to leave. He had to leave, and we had to shoot that one final shot, cheat that one final shot with him. Anyway, that's just a little.
And what was Paul Bartel like?
Oh, Paul Bartel. He's a great guy. I mean, I had met him in passing, because he had worked on some New World movies back when I worked in post-production in New World. He's just a great guy. And he's just he came in because I think we had originally cast somebody else in that club, you know, the Magic Club role. And I think it was the guy from all of the, I can't think of names right now, but from the date, he's like Ricky Jay.
Okay.
Ricky Jay was originally going to do it, who would have been great as well, but he had some prior commitment or got cold feet at the last minute. So Paul was a last minute thing, and you just see how he embraces that role. I mean, he really brings the energy to it, and just I mean, he's a great director in his own right, and just such a great guy to work with. And those are the type of those type of scenes you got to shoot. You got a day to shoot them with that crowd and everything. So he really brought a lot to it, I thought.
And then we have one more question in the chat. From VC Flair, are there any outtakes or deleted scenes fans could watch somewhere? Except for the TV version, I don't know what else there is, right?
Yeah, because it was back at that time. I mean, I'm sure that they never throw anything away. Everything must exist somewhere in Disney's vaults.
Yeah.
But until they put out, and I think because the film is R-rated, it's like Disney is not going to put out a full feature DVD. Maybe they will now. I don't know, but but that's where we'd have to go through all that material and find those deleted scenes and such, because there is some stuff.
It's such a shame.
On Amazon, it's on sale now if you want to buy it. The digital download.
The only thing I don't understand is the Jerky Boys still has just a massive following worldwide. I don't understand why they'll put some of the shittiest movies. This is a cult following. This is a massive underground type movie. Why? I already said I would do commentary. Why wouldn't you?
Because I mean, obviously the interest in a DVD like that would be having you and Kamal hopefully both, adding to it like that. But so they don't have any interest, huh?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
It will. Right now, the movie's going to be owned by Disney, and they're not going to rush to do it. So you would need a company like a Kino Lorber or an Arrow Video or one of these boutique labels to do a special edition. And and that can be done, but that comes down to the licensing, and will the studio even allow the title to be licensed out to a secondary party to do it? It's
an issue. Yeah,
and it's unfortunate because right now the only way you can get it is to buy it through Prime Video. As Bill said, it's on sale right now for anybody who's interested. The DVD is long out of print. There's some sort of region 2 import that you can get from Germany. If you know where to look in certain corners of the internet, there might be a Blu-ray floating around out there, if you know where to look. But it is kind of crazy, given that so many movies have gotten special edition treatments that have probably less of a profile than something like this film. Considering the cult classic nature of it, seems crazy that it hasn't gotten that special edition treatment. Maybe I can use some of the connections that I have in the physical media world and perhaps suggest to some people, at Shout Factory, for instance, or something like that it might be smart to do a special edition. We'll see what people say.
Well, it's funny. You see everywhere on these shows like How I Met Your Mother or Ted Lasso. Any of these shows, they're like the Jerky Boys were an American treasure, an American icon. People are always giving the Jerky Boys props out there. You think Hollywood would take notes somewhere and say, this is still pretty fucking amazing.
Yeah, that's true.
It's,
now with the 30th anniversary coming, maybe that'll motivate them.
So
you never know.
What was the worst note you guys got from Disney while making the movie?
I'm trying to think. Wow, they because I'm trying to think what I can't remember a lot of their notes.
Did they leave you alone during production?
Because I remember like we had, because there's Disney, the major studio, and then there was Caravan Pictures, which was Joe Roth, Roger Birnbaum, and John Glickman, and they were the ones we mainly dealt with. I mean, they would come out to the set, and but I do remember like getting that weird call, like, Jeffrey Katzenberg read the script. He thinks it's the funniest thing he ever read, which I'm sure he said a million times to every other film that he read it on the plane type of thing. But we never really dealt closely with the Disney brass that way. And I felt like we were pretty free to do what we wanted. You remember anything, Johnny, that was where they tried to get us to not do? I mean, it was mainly budget, because I do know that we wanted to shoot an actual scene where you shoot the potatoes at Mickey, shooting
Right.
boiled potatoes at Mickey. We wanted to shoot the actual scene where the clown
Yes.
with the knives.
Yes.
And there was like, you can't. So it's mainly like those would be the
It
two
was
notes that I
all
wanted
budget. It was
Yeah,
all budget. Yeah.
that they said we couldn't, based on the schedule we had and all that, we couldn't actually go out and shoot those scenes. So,
Yeah.
I think that was more that than any specific content that they objected to.
So what was the budget for the movie?
I think it was about 8 million all in.
Oh wow.
Which is and we made a deal so we could shoot. It's a New York crew, but they were able to make a deal that if we didn't work a lot of overtime, we could get a few extra days to shoot. So we did have, enough time to get it done. And I think the fact we're really in New York and it's real New York and we had a great crew to work with is the reason why I think the movie still looks really good in that way.
It does.
Yeah, well,
It does.
yeah,
For that budget.
Uli Steiger shot it,
Yes.
if I'm saying his name right. And, you just take a look at his credits from before the Jerky Boys, and then after he went on to become Roland Emmerich's cinematographer. Yes. He had shot for Dennis Hopper before that.
Uli was one of the nicest guys I ever met.
He's a great guy, yeah.
Because there's shots in the movie that, for lack of a better phrase, like, just like, like in the grand context of studio comedies, there's certain shots in that movie that are just like really good, and you're just like, whoa, okay, like somebody put some thought into this on even a visual level. Whereas a lot of studio comedies look, in my opinion, slapped together like there was no care, with a lot of very indiscriminate lighting and
that used to be the thing, at least for comedies, is just high key light and not make anything special. We wanted it to feel like a New York movie. I mean, being a comedy, we're not going to go super gritty with anything, but having the city of New York itself as your set, it definitely, it helps. I mean, we did shoot some stuff, not on real sound stages, but on a warehouse out by the Intrepid. Remember that, Johnny? We shot the interior of his apartment, the Queens, and the real exterior of his apartment. The interiors, we shot out on a pier. It was that pier.
It was down the piers down on the Hudson, and that was amazing. So the scene, it's the scene where the mafia guys are shooting up at the fire escape, and I jump back in the window, and that was all done on a sound stage.
Yeah, and you wanted to climb. You wanted to climb that thing yourself. Lift yourself. I remember that as well. And we had because there weren't real sound stages. There was no AC, and as you got into May and June when we were shooting, how muggy New York gets.
Yep.
And that was pretty rad.
One of my funny favorite scenes with Alan Arkin is when I'm talking to Alan Arkin, and I the funny thing is I'm insulting myself. I said to him on the telephone, I go, "They call me Rubberneck," and he goes, "Listen, shitface!" He runs back and he picks up the speaker, and he picks it up like as if it's a person that he's gonna kill. He picks it and goes, "Listen, shitface!" That is still one of the funniest things. How Alan Arkin decided to just play that scene
to totally get angry.
Yeah, he's getting angry. I'm calling myself a Rubberneck, and he gets fucking pissed off. Listen, shitface.
He thought that was some kind of a threat.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Alan Arkin. That's stuff like that. It's like people pick out things like that about the Jerky Boys movie, and they to this day they love it, man. And that's why I said it was a wonderful thing, and it's I'm just glad that people still every day a day doesn't go by that I get a text or something about the movie.
And it's funny, and you truly know that Alan Arkin had a sense of humor. I mean, the guy was in Freebie and the Bean and the Jerky Boys, the movie.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And the in-laws
and the in-laws. I just saw you post.
In my opinion, the greatest comedy ever made, The In-Laws.
Yes.
I agree.
At least one of the top five.
So was Emilio Estevez around during the making?
No, I never met Emilio or Tony. I know those are guys you dealt with originally, right, Johnny? But by the time it got to us to actually get going and make the movie,
Right.
Didn't they want to actually play? The rumor I always heard is that Emilio and Tony wanted to play you and Kamal in a movie. And
I don't know about Tony. Tony was a good guy, man. I could see Emilio wanting to try to do that. Emilio was another really nice guy. But I do remember, I remember like it was like yesterday. They came up to me and they said, "Listen, Johnny, the top brass, they want to know, do you think you can do this?" And
Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget, as long as I live, I was like, Jesus Christ, you're asking me this now? And I'm like, and I'll never forget saying I swear to God, I put yourself in my position. 1 minute I'm hanging off of buildings in New York City, and the next minute I'm supposed to be starring in my own movie, and then they're asking me, do you think that you can act? I'm like, and so now I go like this. I said, well, I was never even in a school fucking play. And I said, but I can tell you this. I said, I'm relatively intelligent. I got a good sense of humor. I can read a fucking script, and I have a good way about knowing probably what I should be doing here. So I said, the most I could tell you is when Jim says action, I'm going to have a job to do, and that will send me on my way. And that should be, I said, so I think there's a good chance that I think I can do this. But I was very honest about it because I didn't know. I had no idea. I didn't know, like, maybe what if I do something and I'm saying, what if I think I'm doing good and they say, holy Jesus Christ, this is, but no, I was reasonable. I just said, if so-and-so asked me a question, and you know what, Jim? Another thing I will always remember as long as I live, the night before we started shooting, the night before my first day of shooting, who calls me in my apartment in New York City? Suzanne Shepard.
Oh, yeah.
And Suzanne goes like this to me, Johnny, you're going to be great tomorrow, kid. She goes, I'm going to tell you what you do. She says, you be Johnny Brennan. She goes, you do you. She goes, you see what you do on those records? She goes, that's it. That's all you got to do. You get out there and you do Johnny Brennan, and you're going to knock it out of the park. And as long as I live, I will never forget Suzanne Shepard calling me up to just put me at ease and say, go have fun. And I'll never forget that. That was one of the nicest things ever.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So we have another chat from the Burmando. Thanks for all the laughs. So good to hear your voice, Johnny. My favorite part of the movie is finally getting to see who Uncle Freddie was.
Uncle Freddie. Yeah,
Don
William
Federico.
Yeah, that was great. You guys, I wasn't around for that. Jim, you guys shot.
That's a fun twist to play off of the mythology of your calls, whereas Uncle Freddie's dead, and just bring that character and figure out like a little backstory and who he was. He was this great mob boss in the past, and he actually gives you guys the warning at the beginning of the movie that 100 men are going to show up and try to kill you. That was I mean, that's what we tried to do, is sort of weave together your own mythology and the characters you had already created into this story in this sort of New York mob movie. And that was one of the more fun reveals. We actually, cut back to Sicily with that little kid.
Yeah,
of course you weren't there for those days.
No, but that is still, people go nuts for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the movie really is. It's like they call it now, like, the kids call it Easter eggs, in movies, these little things that fans can pick out. And the Jerky Boys, the movie, really is one of the ultimate Easter egg movies, because there's just so many things that a true fan of those albums could pick through, and then parse out and realize, well, they really nailed it. They really remembered to add that. Oh, they didn't miss a beat. They've had this thing, they had that thing. And given how much I personally listened to those tapes, I can honestly say that you guys didn't miss a beat with the feature film. So
hey, Jim, you remember when all the mob guys came to get us in the apartment, and Alan Arkin sees William Hickey, and he's like, oh, and he gets on his knee to say hello to him, and he's like, oh, fuck, shit.
When he gets burned by the Well, that's when he bows down to Don Federico, right?
Right.
He gets burnt by the cigar.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Fuck, shit.
Yeah. And then the music comes in. But but that's, what does he say to him? Capo di tutti, right?
So, the Capo di tutti capo.
Right.
It's
but it's
you. And then
yeah,
we go
it's
to the
you.
flashback.
It's
yes.
you. Yeah, that's it. That fucking shit. I still laugh at that today. I still love it. It's
Yeah,
great, man.
that's a fun moment.
So wrapping up. So the movie gets released. Was there any problem with it being released? I know there was a snowstorm, but do you
That's
feel like Disney did a good job releasing it, or?
Well, that's always the thing, I mean, and I've worked around and in Hollywood for a lot of years, and there's always, I mean, we hoped obviously the movie went out and made $100 million. I think it ended up making maybe 8, so that's and the hope, but then it's always the marketing people are going to, which I've done some movie marketing as well. Like there was this guy, the head of marketing at Disney, who was like, this is testing, testing for the marketing as well. We're going to open, and then the blizzard hit the Northeast.
That's right.
And that's always that's people couldn't get out and see the movie was sort of the excuse why it didn't do that well. Whether that's, you never really know in that case. But that first weekend, it used to be. I mean, now with streaming and all that, nobody cares about these things as much. But it used to be in those days that first weekend, just they can calculate on Friday night how much your movie is going to make, and if something slows down the release, stops people from getting there. That was always the rationale for why it didn't do as well as we all hoped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, do you feel like it was like a bigger hit on VHS? Because that's where I watched it.
Yeah, that was the time when VHS was huge, because it was a little bit before DVDs got really rolling.
Yeah.
So that's where most people saw it, and on cable, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it still did. It's still like open number 3 that weekend, and it was also not, now they do like 5,000 screen releases. I think this was on around 1,000 screens. So, so it wasn't terrible for that, but I think you're probably right that more people saw it on VHS.
I think Scorsese's a fan of the movie.
Yes.
He is. There's all these like weird Scorsese Jerky Boy fan theories and stuff. And if I ever get a chance to interview him, that's the first question I'm going to ask. But
Well,
I can tell you he is a fan, and I know for a fact he's a fan of Kamal's some of Kamal's pictures.
Oh, the movies Kamal has made since. That's right, because
Right.
they stay in touch, I think. But yeah, I read he did an interview in Fade In, I think it's Fade In magazine, around the time, a year or two after the movie came out, where he actually goes out of his way to talk about how, how he liked a lot of the movie and all that, which I was always very proud to hear,
Yes,
And
yes.
and a friend of mine was working on the restoration of Raging Bull or something like that, and he said he brought it up. I know the guy who directed that Jerky Boys movie, and Marty supposedly still remembered it. So
Yeah, that's
always
great.
good to hear. And it's
That's-
also,
Gotta love that.
the movie is kind of a riff off of his movies in a way.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Oh, totally. There's
So,
there's so many things in there that if you're a fan of Scorsese's movies from that, especially the gangster films, you guys are totally playing it off. But guys, just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to chat. And I'm just going to close out the show with a fun announcement. If you didn't get your Jerky Boy fill, Bill is hard at work on writing a screenplay for a Jerky Boys biopic that I am producing, and that Johnny has been gracious enough to give us his time over the last 6 months. We've been collaborating with him, and we're gonna remind folks that it is still okay to laugh, and that we all should be laughing, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're just wanting to get it out there that for fans of Jerky Boys and perhaps people who have never even heard of them, be on the lookout because there'll be something fun coming your way for everybody. So thank you to everybody who's listening to this and who will listen to it in the future. Share it on your social media channels. Look out for Johnny on Cameo. Get some fun messages through him, and keep listening to all the prank phone calls. I got my cat coming in here for a photo bomb.
I think the Stone Age is on Tubi or Amazon right now. So
yeah, it's on Amazon Prime, and I think Tubi as well. And yeah,
so check it out.
Always.
Tubi's a gold mine. So
great, thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. It was awesome.
Hey, Jim, great seeing you, man. It's been a while.
Seeing you, man. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah,
for the next
absolutely.
30 years.
Absolutely, Jim. Good
Thank
seeing
you, guys. It's been fun.
All right, take care.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.